This episode of Bullet Heaven was made possible with a copy of the game provided by Nicalis. In episode 59 of Bullet Heaven, we took a look at Ikaruga for the Xbox 360. In general, Ikaruga is regarded as one of the very best shooting games ever devised, blending a two-color simplicity with complex shot and scoring patterns and one of the best presentations we've experienced. We really liked it is what we're saying. Developed under the codename Project RS2 as a follow-up to Radiant Silvergun, several versions of this game have been released, with the most recent iteration making its way to, yeah, you guessed it, the Nintendo Switch. But rather than go over exactly the same gameplay mechanics and scoring points we did in episode 59, we thought it'd be neat to compare the 5 home versions of the game, from Dreamcast to Switch. The core game is identical to what we saw with our first go at Ikaruga in Series 4, but each has key differences as well as the odd exclusive mode that make them all worth playing. So, let's take a closer look. Episode 59 goes over the main mechanics of Ikaruga very well, so for the lowdown on how to play, be sure to check it out. It's linked in the description. Outside of that, Ikaruga in all of its forms features a few different gameplay modes between its different versions, but first, here's a quick refresher. The core gameplay in Ikaruga has players switching their ship's color between white and black. Players can absorb enemy shots that are the same color that they are while dealing double damage to enemies of the opposite color. Absorbing enemy attacks will fill a gauge that can be discharged to attack the enemy with a powerful homing attack that grows more powerful the more the gauge is filled. Basically, it's extremely simple, yet difficult to master, and has absolutely stood the test of time since release. The typical main game has players progressing through 5 stages by way of 3 difficulty levels. Easy allows players to play Ikaruga without worrying about enemies firing suicide bullets at them when defeated. Normal will have enemies of the same color the player is return fire when killed, and hard results in enemy retribution regardless of color. It gets brutally difficult around the halfway mark, but that also lends to the game's overall replay value despite its small number of stages. For players that want more though, each home version offers all kinds of unique gameplay types. Trial Game is a shortened game mode that lasts for only the first 2 stages of Ikaruga. It's a great score attack mode that is perfect for newcomers, as the harder stages are never actually reached in this mode. The Trial Game is only found in the Dreamcast and Gamecube versions of the game. Practice Mode has players taking on the game 1 stage at a time by difficulty to get used to its bullet, enemy, and scoring patterns. Only stages cleared can be accessed in this way, and stages of higher difficulty must also be cleared in this manner. Practice Mode can be found in all versions except for the Xbox Live Arcade version. Prototype Mode has players take on the main game with only a finite amount of ammunition, starting with 300 shots. The special homing weapon can be used at the cost of 100 shots immediately, and ammunition can be recovered by absorbing enemy bullets and lasers. It can be found in all versions of the game. Conquest Mode allows players to practice individual sections of any cleared stage, complete with demo play and half-speed options to allow players to really hunker down and practice color chaining for the best scores possible. Only the Gamecube version features this mode. Online multiplayer allows players to play a co-op game with another person over the internet. Only the Xbox Live Arcade version incorporated this mode. Finally, double play allows one player to play with 2 ships on a single controller. This brain-melting style of play requires a ton of coordination, but can make for some of the fastest kills and longest chains in the game if mastered. Double play can be found in the PC and Switch versions of the game. Now that we're up on the different modes of play, let's take a closer look at each version of the game. Ikaruga was originally released to arcades in 2001 on Naomi hardware, making it a perfect fit for the Sega Dreamcast. In 2002, it was ported to the Dreamcast as a perfect conversion, much like Radiant Silvergun was when converted to the Saturn from Sega Titan Video arcade hardware. Players can play the normal and trial games, practice mode, and the unlockable prototype mode in this version. The Sega Dreamcast version also featured extremely sharp VGA output, 2-player co-op, rumble support, and Tate rotation. This version of Ikaruga is pretty basic, but demonstrated the power of the Dreamcast in ways that absolutely holds up today, with fantastic flashes of color and even software-generated live sound that has gone unrivaled across all versions even after all these years. Atari would pick up Ikaruga for release on the Nintendo Gamecube worldwide in 2003. The Gamecube version looks a lot like the Dreamcast version at first glance, but actually comes away looking a tad worse, even with progressive scan support through component video. Overblurred by cubic-style anti-aliasing hides a lot of the detail, and the lighting and color just aren't quite there. The gameplay also seems to be a touch slower, and the music was played from the disc, creating a bit of desync with the action on screen, especially if the game is paused. Interestingly, large lasers also have much more pushback than in any other version of the game. They end up shoving players around the screen much more forcefully, and this can cause problems with the efficiency of enemy kills. It is also said that the PAL Gamecube version is markedly less good than the NTSC versions, thanks to the game running at a slower 50 Hz. Beyond these issues though, everything from the Dreamcast version is here with the addition of the exclusive Conquest Mode. Challenge Mode is also a bit different in this version. When the player finishes their single credit run, they are given a password that can be put into an online leaderboard, though it has since become defunct. The Xbox Live Arcade version of Ikaruga for Xbox 360 was released in 2008 by Microsoft Game Studios. This version brought Ikaruga into high definition with shiny reflective surfaces, enhanced texturing, and super smooth edges. Though it lacks modes and features from previous versions, including Practice Mode and the art and music galleries, Prototype Mode is still accessible, though only by selecting it from the basic menu before the game starts. However, it's very clear that the XBLA version features much less overall content than any other version. On the other hand, the XBLA version of Ikaruga does allow players the option to play online co-op with others, a feature absent from all other versions. It also introduced achievements, replays, and online leaderboards to the game, which would find their way into all future versions. This version is also backward compatible with the Xbox One, allowing players with Microsoft's newest home console to download it and play it even today. A secondary release to arcades for Ikaruga happened on Jessica Live hardware. This version would see release to PC via Steam by way of Treasure themselves. However, this version has a lot of internet integration. Achievements and replays can't be earned and high scores can't be recorded if the player is in offline mode. In addition, the main game will only record scores if continues are set to off, and no changes are made to the lifestock or extend score. The main game is also played like the GameCube's Challenge Mode, where players only have a single credit to rank into the online leaderboards. If continues are activated, or if options like the amount of lives or extend conditions are altered, players cannot place on these leaderboards. This also disables the player's score monitor on the side of the screen, which highlights when a player does a personal best run through the game in general and by stage. It's a shame too, because this could still be handy in more than just a single credit game. Practice Mode returns as Chapter Select alongside a more easily accessible Prototype Mode. Chapter Select is able to be accessed for both normal and Prototype modes so long as the stage has been cleared in the main game. This version also introduces Double Play Mode where players can control both Ikaruga and Ginkei at once. Immediate access to the game's appendix content is also available right from the start, rather than waiting through various requirements. Steam trading cards were also added to the mix. In a lot of ways, the PC version is the most streamlined one, though it also had a few technical issues. It is fairly highly regarded despite this, and makes for a very accessible Ikaruga that even most modest computers can run. That brings us to the Nintendo Switch version. Converted by Zero, who worked on the now delisted and lost mobile version of the game, the Switch version of Ikaruga was released on May 29, 2018 by Nicalis. In many ways, the Switch version of Ikaruga is very similar to the Steam version of the game, right down to the UI, achievement system, and main game. The Switch version of the game once again gives players the option to unlock all of the appendix materials and extra modes straight off the bat, just like the PC version. It also gives players immediate access to Prototype Mode as well as Double Play. The main game in the Switch version is played identically to the PC version. Players have just one credit to work with, and that's it. Activating the option to continue, as well as tweaking lives or extend scores, will disable all online rankings and score monitoring. Of course, the game is still just as playable beyond these features as the Dreamcast version was, especially with the ability to play in Tate on the go, but Ikaruga suffers from a couple of issues in this version. First and foremost, there's a very noticeable input lag, especially when using a third-party controller here, and it makes the game very difficult to rein in. The Joy-Cons actually work better than the 8-bit OS N30 Pro just on delay times alone, but it's still present, however slight. Additionally, the twiddly nature of the Switch's analogs on the Joy-Cons are not especially great for the kind of gameplay that Ikaruga boasts. Playing on docked is a bit better though. We had the best results using the Pokken Tournament USB controller and its fantastic D-pad since it's wired in, and it was much speedier. And if that were all there was to it, we'd be fine, but some of the hiccups from the PC version have also made their way into this version of the game, in exactly the same spots. This can be seen as early as in Stage 1, where extra enemies that appear after fast, efficient kills can sometimes just vanish, throwing the whole flow of the stage off. We can't imagine how this has been a thing for so long without being fixed, especially since Ikaruga on Switch is a whole new version and all. These are pretty serious complaints considering where we've come from in the past. Playing Ikaruga on Xbox 360, Gamecube, and even the Dreamcast just feels so sharp. But the Switch version feels mushy unless you have the right pad for it. If you have the right connections though, the Switch version is still one that's a real blast to play, one player or two, especially on the go. As a quick refresher on scoring, Ikaruga has a simple yet complex system that ties into the basic polarity mechanics of the game. Players can chain enemies in groups of 3 to obtain a bonus score for each one achieved. The first chain starts at just 100 points, but will grow with each successive one to 25,600 points on the 9th one and beyond. The first and second stages are pretty easy to maintain a decent chain in, but stages 3 and on are ridiculously complex, which is where the Gamecube's Conquest Mode comes in very handy. A stage end score is also applied for the time left on the clock when defeating the stage end boss, as well as a bonus for the maximum achieved chain. A letter grade is also applied to a maximum of S++. And good news, I finally got an A+ on stage 1 after all this time. Yeah, is this ever a hard game to get good at? The Switch leaderboards will maintain a player's best score overall and by stage, as well as maintaining a gameplay replay. But this takes a long time to save. Like a ridiculous amount of time, just an absurd amount. We wonder if a LAN cable would be better for the kind of waiting around we have to do at game over. Presentation-wise, everything you'd have expected from the Steam version is here as well. 720p visuals while in handheld and 1080p when docked means that no matter how you play, Ikaruga is super sharp, and it all runs at a solid 60 frames per second. The texturing is just a smidge blurry by comparison, but it's definitely no worse than the still awesome Dreamcast version. Like other versions of the game though, new impactful title screen art has been produced for the Switch version of the game that changes depending on whether the game is set in horizontal or vertical mode. Meanwhile, the sound is a little on the compressed side with an overall volume that is quite a bit quieter than all other versions of the game. This is a bit of a shame since the soundtrack and effects are simply incredible otherwise. The UI in the Switch version is, once again, the same as the Steam version. It's easy to navigate and all kinds of options exist for remapping controllers, starting the game with a specified game type or difficulty rather than the user select before the game starts, and of course the all-important Tate options which can also be activated while the game is in progress. And while the available gallery pieces don't include the new pieces made for the Switch version of the game, a set of in-game achievements identical to those in the PC version is still available for players to conquer. So how does the Switch version of Ikaruga stack up? Let's take a look. The control in Ikaruga is excellent as always, so long as players have a controller with a good response time. While most controllers feel a touch delayed, the 8-bit SN30 Pro was just too far gone for effective use in docked mode. As always, Ikaruga's challenge is tough, unforgiving, but totally able to be overcome with practice and skill. 5 stages sounds short for length until the amount of time required for effectively making progress in Ikaruga is discovered. Multiple game modes, co-op, double play, and achievements bump up the replay value. Ikaruga's incredible visual style isn't lost on the Switch with sharp visuals, great environments, and simply amazing design. Ikaruga's sound is always a standout with one of the best OSTs we've ever heard. Its sound effects are equally amazing, but it's all really quiet and lacks the punch of the Dreamcast version especially. Ikaruga's ingenuity makes it one of the finest games ever created from a gameplay standpoint even after all this time. For the most part, the Switch version maintains everything that's special about Ikaruga, but it's pretty disappointing that the player's score progress is disabled when continues are activated. As a result, it feels as if the main game in Ikaruga is just challenge mode, not the 3-credit 3-life default game players have had up until the PC version. $15 is all you'll pay for Ikaruga on the Switch, which is highly affordable versus the Dreamcast or Gamecube versions. For the amount of hardcore gameplay that players will get from it, it's definitely worth its price of admission. The Switch version of Ikaruga was a pretty big surprise when it was announced at the beginning of May 2018, and it's a natural fit on the platform given the Tate-on-the-go flexibility that the Switch touts. That it's more or less just a port of the PC version of the game, which has its obvious issues and drawbacks, is a slight disappointment, but Ikaruga is still an absolute must-play, and it officially makes the Switch a serious contender for the best shoot-'em-up console since the Xbox 360, and maybe even the Sega Saturn. Ikaruga on Nintendo Switch gets a 4.75 out of 5. You can get a copy of Ikaruga on the Nintendo Switch eShop for about $15 US. Well, that took quite a bit of time, but we really hope you enjoyed this particular episode of Bullet Heaven. I gotta say, the convenience of having Ikaruga on the go is nice and all, but man, that Dreamcast version, it's something else, isn't it? I'm definitely looking forward to exploring that a little more in the upcoming Sega Dream Quest. Still, especially for Tate-on-the-go, the Switch version isn't a bad deal at all. It's back to regular episodes coming soon on Bullet Heaven, with Quad Fighter K leading the charge.